One of my favorite stories in all the Bible is Acts chapter 14. And there we see the power of the gospel. What is the gospel? John Stott says that the gospel in its simplest forms are that God saves sinners. It's a reminder of the gloriousness of God, the power of what he does, the activity that he does, and it reminds us who we are, that we are loved by God, but we are sinners. And this gospel in Acts chapter 14 saves us from these two extremes that the Apostle Paul experienced and that you and I are tempted to experience as well. And so in Acts chapter 14, in verses 8 and 9, that Paul performs this miracle in which he takes this man who is born lame and he heals him. And the crowd is so amazed by everything that God has done that through Paul, listen to what it says in verse number 11. When the crowd saw what Paul had done, they shouted in their language, "The gods have come down to visit us in human form." Literally what they want to do in that moment is they want to take the human being Paul and make him into a god. They want to elevate him into a position of lordship over them. They think that he is their savior. They want to throne him. And yet Paul's response to that is, I'm not going to accept it. I'm not going to take that. I have such an understanding of who I am that whenever you try to elevate me, I'm not going to allow my ego to explode, to think I have a sense of entitlement now that I deserve that. Think about how easy it would have been for Paul to know, I've suffered so much, I didn't deserve that. So why not enjoy this thing I also don't enjoy that's actually going to be positive for me? But the gospel prevents Paul from doing that. Knowing that he is a sinner, he does not allow the crowd's adulation, their desire to want to throne him, to elevate his ego. And this, then just a few verses later, a group of rabble-rousers come from Antioch, and the opinions of the crowd immediately change. They go from wanting to throne him to where they actually stone him. Listen to Acts chapter 14, beginning in verse number 19. Then some Jews came down from Antioch and Iconium and won the crowd over. They stoned Paul and dragged him outside the city, thinking he was dead. But after the disciples had gathered around him, he got up and went back into the city. And the next day, he and Barnabas left for Derbe. How would you respond if you were stoned for doing good? If you were obeying God in every way, and the outcome of that was not the adulation of the crowd, but was the mockery of the crowd, an endangerment of your own life. My response to that very possibly would be, God, where are you? I might begin to doubt who he is and his work around me. I might begin to question, should I actually be in the ministry? Should I follow him? If I'm suffering for doing good, then maybe I should stop doing good. And yet the gospel saves Paul from that very concept. Instead, even after he was stoned, understanding the value that God had placed within him, that he did have value and worth, Paul got up. He got up to obey again. He got up to preach again. He got up to walk again. And he did the very thing that God had called him to do. The gospel saves Paul from the throne and the stone. It didn't allow him to get so beaten down that he couldn't get up. It kept him from elevating himself to think he was above everything. To the extent that you and I have a healthy view of the gospel, we have a healthy view of ourselves. And that will be proven by the fact that our egos will not be elevated and they won't be deflated. We won't assume we're higher and better than what we actually are. We won't buy into the words of our critics. Instead, we will simply obey him, continuing to get up and do what he says.